Good afternoon. Welcome back to my channel Literati. I will continue with my discussion on Dr. Faustus. In my last podcast, I had analyzed Act 1 with all the four scenes. Today, I will discuss Scene 1 of Act 2 because this scene, this first scene of this act is a long scene and it is full of an emotional intensity. As already discussed, to see a man court damnation and to give away his soul to the powers of evil must have been an emotionally terrifying scene or to witness it for the Elizabethan audience. But what is more remarkable in this particular act, Act 2, is the difference which we notice in Faustus's persona. When we had met Faustus in the first scene of Act 1, he was a man who was full of confidence, a feeling of euphoria, grand dreams, a consciousness of his own greatness. As the journey he has taken for himself moves on, in the close of Act 1 or Scene 3, we find a rather subdued man and who is trying to make the best of a bad bargain because he has already stepped into an unknown region where things are different, but he is a man who has deluded himself. There is no external temptation, but this is the self-hypnosis of a man who wants to believe a dream world which he has conjured up for himself, because he mesmerizes himself with the hypnotic ideas of building bridges through the air, being lord and commander of all elements, joining continents, and all the extraordinary dreams of the Renaissance world and the possibilities of achievement. Scene 1 of Act 2 is a long scene. There is a great emotional intensity in the scene. Faustus, already a subdued man, his loneliness, his isolation becomes more and more pronounced. In the first lines, we find him moving from self-doubt, almost to despair, then back to his temptation, the feeling of self-temptation which he cannot resist, his lack of resolution which he constantly urges upon himself. Because this line, be resolute, this phrase occurs again and again. It has occurred in Scene 1, in Scene 3, and by its repetition, it becomes ironic. It points out to exactly the lack of resolution in Faustus's character, this weakness, this self-deception, this flaw in his character which has led him to his destruction or the hubris. Other words which he has used again and again is ravish, which has a very physical meaning, and it points out to this trait of sensuality in his character, another flaw, another weakness in his character. The first lines of Scene 1, Act 2, we see Faustus musing to himself, moving from self-doubt to despair, to having second thoughts, lacking in resolution, trying to gauge his own feelings, trying to muster up courage because he's too intelligent a man now to realize what he has done. And he tries to convince himself in both ways. First, he tries to tell himself to turn back to God. Then the next moment he says, no, the God thou servest is thine own appetite. So he's honest in this, but he lacks resolution. But the man now we meet is a different Faustus. He is a man who is subdued, who is full of doubt. That deterioration in his character is already visible, and he is thinking to himself. He says, the first lines are, now Faustus, must thou needs be damned. This terrifying thought comes to him, and he tries to convince himself, he tries to muster up enough courage to go back to God. But his ideas, his views, his values are inverted, and he is resolute, but in the wrong direction. He is resolute in pursuing the black magic. And as if to compensate for his momentary doubt about worshipping evil, this soliloquy ends with the terrifying image of offering the lukewarm blood of newborn babies to the altar of evil, an image which reminds us of Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare's Macbeth, when she had said to Macbeth to convince him that she would not hesitate to dash out the brains of newborn babies. Again, at this moment of indecision, when the struggle is going on between the good and evil in Faustus's character, as symbols or as remnants of the religious drama, good angel and bad angel appear, but tragically, again, the words of good and angel fall on deaf ears, while Faustus, in almost a desperate moment, seizes on the words of the bad angel when he says, think of honor and wealth. And once more, Faustus moves onto a rhapsody which is created by him. Like I said, there's no external temptation. This is the delusion or the self-hypnosis of a man who wants to believe what he conjures up for himself. And then again, the fact that his values are inverted when he says, what God can hurt me? So it should have been just the opposite, but he uses these words which sound almost sacrilegious. He had earlier also said to the two magicians that their conference was sage, and then he had said that virtue be in these words, in the words of the hellish words, and he had said that bless me with your sage conference to the two magicians who were the tools to take him to his damnation. And then waiting for Mephistopheles, when Mephistopheles comes with the message, Faustus once more receives a setback, because Mephistopheles is not what he had expected him to be, or not what the readers had expected him to be. Mephistopheles had made it very clear that he was unhappy, he was a damned soul, he was a suffering soul, and he was not someone who was equal to God. But now, as the lines move on, Mephistopheles makes it clear that Faustus has to sign his soul in a legal document and sign it with his blood. Here again there are terrifying moments when the blood congeals. When Faustus stabs his arm, the blood does not flow. There might be a scientific reason for it, but Faustus, who is already like a man torn into two, the conflict has already settled in his soul, because the deterioration he has set in, he has already entered his personal hell, as Mephistopheles had said that it was a continuous torture. And the man who had built such impossible dreams is now a man who is shaky, unsure of himself, full of doubt, and also a realization of the enormity of what he is about to do. So when the blood does not flow, so that he cannot sign his name, he is again full of these tortured thoughts which come to his tortured mind. And he says, is it a sign? Does my soul rebel against me that I am signing it over to evil? And when he is musing, Mephistopheles immediately brings coal and his blood starts flowing, and then he signs the document. Again, Mephistopheles' words take us by surprise, because uncharacteristic to the fact that he is a symbol of evil, he is again portrayed as a suffering soul. And he says to himself, what will not I do to obtain his soul? All these sublime touches add a deep meaning and a very profound expression to Marlowe's extraordinary visualization of the definition of evil and hell. Faustus, reckless as always, when he makes the sign with a flourish, he uses words consummatum est. These words are blasphemy. Faustus almost seems on the point of pushing his luck. He deliberately says these words which were on the cross when Jesus Christ was crucified. That means consummatum est means this is finally the end. And Faustus using these words where they are not needed just to prove a point, he commits a blasphemy and a sacrilege. But then Faustus is already like a man who is haunted. This degeneration in his character appears from the moment he has aligned himself with the evil. And like a haunted man, he seems to be hallucinating. And he says that the words homofuge, that is man fly, seem to be written on my arm. That means fly away, run away, escape. And then, almost like a hallucinating man, he says, no, there's nothing writ. Then again he says, no, there's something writ. And where shall I fly? I shall not fly here. And here we see Faustus already in his personal hell. And then Mephistopheles, because he has to play the role of the agent of damnation, he tries to distract him and says that I must keep him from thinking too much and try to erase his doubt. And there's a very trite and a very meaningless and a very superficial show of some kind of singing and dancing and gifts and all kinds of meaningless things. Faustus, too intelligent a man to be distracted, is still discontent. There is definitely an element of self-doubt which has come in his mind, conscious of what he is doing. He had expected to be full of a sense of his own greatness, but as the seconds tick on, more and more he is aware of his own imperfection. The idea which he had said that yet art Faustus, but you are but a man. He wanted to be more than a man, and now he is less than human. As the moments move on and take him towards his damnation, he becomes smaller and smaller in size, we can say, and we witness a man who had everything in the world, who was loved, respected, who was honored, who was full of an awareness of his own extraordinary achievement, becomes a man who is shaky, full of doubts, full of despair, uncertainty, a man who is tortured in spirit. Finally, he signs the document, and having committed this act, he turns to Mephistopheles and asks him some questions, because that was his main reason for discontent, that there were certain things which were not known to him. He was but a man. He wanted to be more than a man, and in the end he becomes less than a man. He wishes to become a base animal even. And then finally, having signed over his soul to Mephistopheles, he turns to some intellectual questioning, and the first thing he asks Mephistopheles is the question about hell. Now, Mephistopheles is evasive in his answers. Faustus is not satisfied. He wants to know specific answers. He's a man with extraordinary intellect, and he wishes to know what exactly hell is. Mephistopheles' words are chilling, and he says, within the bowels of these elements, where we are tortured and remain forever, hell hath no limits, nor is circumscribed in one self-place, but where we are is hell, and where hell is, there must we ever be. And to be short, when all the world dissolves, and every creature shall be purified, all places shall be hell that is not heaven. And his words are sinister, his words are frightening, his words are terrifying, and his words are not what Faustus had expected to hear. But again, these words are one of the most eloquent, sublime, and profound definitions of a concept, because hell is not a place, it is a state of being. And this is what Mephistopheles says: hell hath no limits, nor is circumscribed in one self place, and where we are is hell, and where hell is, there must we ever be. So, wherever there is pain, sorrow, torture, unhappiness, ugliness, negation, agony, mental, emotional, and physical pain, that is being in hell. And Mephistopheles carries his hell with him, within himself. Faustus has also entered his hell. Hell is personal. Faustus, still not refusing to believe or trying to brush aside these words, the total meaning of these words, the real significance of these words, try to brush us aside and says, I think hell's a fable. Mephistopheles again says words which bring a feeling of terror. Yea, think so still, till experience change thy mind. And when Faustus airily says, oh, hell is a fable, he says, go on thinking this, till you will know better. Why dost thou think that Faustus shall be damned? And then Faustus, in spite of himself, says, do you think I will enter hell, I shall be damned? And then Mephistopheles says, you have signed away your soul, and this is the document to prove that you are going to be damned. But the truth is that Faustus has already entered hell. Gone is a man who was so happy, confident, full of himself. Now he is a man who is racked by his feelings of doubt and uncertainty. But then, even when Mephistopheles says words which have such a sinister meaning, which are so ominous, again Faustus chooses to ignore it, and he airily says, yea, and body too, but what of that? Thinkest thou that Faustus is so fond to imagine that after this life there is any pain? Tush, these are trifles and mere old wives' tales. And trying to convince himself more than Mephistopheles, he is saying words which he wants to believe. And then he says, no, these are just old wives' tales, and what about my soul? I give my body to. But after this life, there is nothing. But then, once more, Mephistopheles does not leave any doubt to the meaning, and he says, but I am an instance to prove the contrary, for I tell thee, I am damned, and now in hell. And he says, why? I am a damned soul, and I am in hell. Nay, and this be hell, I'll willingly be damned. What? Sleeping, eating, walking and disputing? And then Faustus once more refuses to heed the warning. He does repent, but when in the end it is too late. Now with each passing moment, he is running out of time, but he chooses not to believe it. That is the tragedy of Faustus. These great men of the Greek tragedies, of the Shakespearean drama, of the great tragedies of the world, are full of such extraordinary qualities, such potential, such greatness, and they choose the wrong path, or it is because of the weakness of their character that they come to this tragic end. And at least in Shakespearean tragic protagonists, in the end they recover some of their sublime qualities and their greatness and their nobility. But in Faustus we find that as he moves forward, whatever vestiges of greatness were present in him erode themselves one by one, and in the end we have a man who is like a caricature or a shadow of a man he once was. And now here deliberately trying to distract his mind from the ominous meaning, the dark meaning, the undeniable truth of Mephistopheles' words about hell, that it is not a place but a mental state, and where the damned souls are, they forever they carry their hells with them. Now he goes to another extreme, and he, from the intellectual discussion, from the philosophical discussion about hell, he now suddenly behaves like a lascivious man, like a sensual man, and he says, I will have a wife. But then Mephistopheles says that I will give you, you cannot think of having a wife, but you can have a woman, and he conjures up a kind of an image for her, and enters a devil with fireworks, all kinds of, theatrical or theatrics for the audience to make it more impressive. It would have been quite a frightening sight for the Elizabethan age audience. And Faustus once more is left bereft, he's left cheated of what he had desired, and he is quite disgusted by the sight. And then Mephistopheles tries to persuade him, or tries, just like one would try to placate a child, one would try to soothe a child. He says, why do you want to get married? You can have any woman, and you just tell me, and the most beautiful woman shall be at your disposal. But then almost to, like one would try to distract a small child, one would try to convince a child with a toy playfully and delude a child. He leaves Faustus at the end of this scene with some books of magic, some kinds of articles and some drawings. And Faustus once more at the close of this scene is a man who is someone who has been betrayed. But then again, this betrayal is not something external. This betrayal of the self comes from within Faustus. It is Faustus who has betrayed himself, his soul, his spirit, his God. It is not that the temptation has come from outside. It is the flaw of Faustus's character. He cannot resist. He does not have the resolution which he urges upon himself. He is a weak person, and all the flamboyance, the euphoria, the high spirits which we had witnessed in the beginning, in the first scene, of a man who was conscious of his own superiority, by the close of scene 3 of Act 1, have already become mere echoes, because again Faustus is like a subdued man, cheated of his bargain. And here in the first scene, at the close of the first scene of Act 2, the long scene, where at moments Faustus is on the verge of some intense soul searching, he lets that moment go, because he does not have the resolution he urges upon himself. His values are inverted. He thinks of which God can hurt me. He thinks of virtue in the books of black magic. He thinks the black magicians Valdus and Cornelius to advise him in a sage conference. And his topsy-turvy world, where he had decided to achieve greatness but through the wrong means, leave him at the close of scene 1 in Act 2, like a man who is looking at meaningless books, and we are reminded of his dreams when he had said to himself in that mesmerizing speech, when he had built a world of imagination with his words, beautiful words in Marlowe's blank verse, lines which soar with a magnificence of how he would know all the exotic philosophy of the strange kings, how he would read and get the extraordinary knowledge which was forbidden to man because he wished to be more than a man, how he would fly through the air, build bridges, and become the emperor of the world. And now here we have this man who is certainly like a shadow of himself, disconsolately looking at some books of magic alone in his study. As the action moves on, the isolation of Faustus becomes more and more prominent. Thank you. We will continue with the other scenes of Act 2 in the other lectures. Thank you.